12 years ago, I stood in a small apartment staring at a wedding suit hanging in my closet, pressed, ready, perfect. In just 8 days, I was supposed to stand under glittering chandeliers at Maplewood Hall, the most beautiful venue in Dallas, and promise forever to the woman I loved. Her name was Emma Davis. She had insisted on that venue. White stone walls, chandeliers that looked like frozen stars, a terrace that kissed the edge of a lake. It was elegance made tangible, the kind of place people whispered about. The kind of place I couldn't really afford, but I didn't care. I had a good job, a steady paycheck, and a belief, a naive but unshakable belief, that love could handle anything. That week, everything began to unravel. It started on a Wednesday morning. My boss called me into his office, the kind of room that always smelled like burnt coffee and stress. His desk was empty except for one folder. He didn't even look at me for long. "Jack," he said quietly, "the investors are pulling out. We're shutting down 1/3 of the company. I'm sorry, but your position is gone. Effective today." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I remember walking out of that building with a cardboard box in my hands, a few framed photos, a mug, some papers, and 1,000 questions swirling in my head. My wedding was in 8 days. 8 days. How do you tell the woman you love that the foundation you were building your life on just collapsed overnight? That night I called her. My voice trembled, but I tried to keep it together. "Hey," I said, "something happened today. The company lost its funding. I got laid off. But it's temporary. I'll find something soon. I've already got a few leads." For a long moment, she didn't say anything. The silence on the line stretched thin, sharp, then her voice came through, flat, careful. "My dad says this changes everything." I froze. "Emma," I said, trying to laugh it off, "it's just a job. I'll get another one." "We're still us." She didn't argue, but she didn't reassure me either, and in that silence I felt something inside me shift, something I couldn't name at the time. The next day, she asked me to have dinner with her parents. Now, I'd had dinner with Paul and Laura Davis before, her father, the towering businessman who always looked like he was measuring my worth in dollars, and her mother, who smiled politely but never really looked me in the eye. But this dinner? This one felt different. It felt like walking into a courtroom where the verdict was already written. Paul Davis sat at the head of the table, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his expression carved from stone. Laura sat silently beside him. Emma barely met my gaze. He started without hesitation. "Jack," he said, "I'll speak plainly. You're a sinking ship. My daughter will not marry a man who can't provide the life she deserves." I clenched my jaw. "This isn't about money," I said quietly. "It's about love. We'll face things together, like every couple does." He smirked, the kind of smirk that could cut through steel. "Love," he said, "is for songs and movies. In real life, stability matters. Security matters. And you've lost both." I looked at Emma. I searched her face for the woman who once promised me forever. But her eyes didn't meet mine. 3 days later, she ended the engagement, not in person. Her mother came to my apartment. She stood at the door holding a small velvet box. "Emma wanted you to have this back," she said softly. I opened it. Inside was the engagement ring, the one I'd saved for, chosen carefully, the one that once sparkled with hope. It looked cold now, lifeless. Maplewood Hall was canceled. The caterers refunded half the deposit. My mother, Ruth, called me in tears after hearing the news from a family friend. And my younger brother, Mark, always the fighter, showed up at my door with a 6-pack. He looked at me, shrugged, and said, "They're wrong about you, man. One day you'll prove it." At the time, I laughed. A hollow laugh. But those words stuck with me. Because the truth was, the humiliation stayed longer than the heartbreak. It wasn't just that Emma left. It was the way her family made me feel. Like I was nothing. Like my worth could be measured in a paycheck, in a bank balance, in whether I could impress a man who wore expensive suits and never smiled. For years, their words haunted me. They were there every time I worked late, every time I took a risk, every time I failed, and they were there again. Last month. Because last month, I signed the final papers acquiring a mid-sized tech firm. That deal came with a little bonus, full control of Davis Manufacturing, Paul Davis's company. I could have taken the victory quietly, could have stayed anonymous, collected my dividends. and let the past fade into memory. But I didn't. Instead, I rented out Maplewood Hall, the same venue that should have hosted my wedding 12 years ago. The same chandeliers, the same white stone walls, the same terrace overlooking the same lake, only this time, it wasn't for a wedding, it was for a celebration, a gala marking the biggest acquisition my company had ever made. I made sure the guest list included every major name in the city's business scene. And 3 names in particular: Paul Davis, Laura Davis, Emma Davis. The invitations went out in embossed gold envelopes. On the back, in small, unassuming letters, the words, "Hosted by Jack Miller." I knew they'd come. People like the Davises never turned down an opportunity to be seen among power. That night, I stood in the center of Maplewood Hall. The lights shimmered above me, reflections dancing across the polished marble floor. My suit was perfectly tailored, my cufflinks gleamed, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was chasing anyone's approval. I waited. And when the tall glass doors opened and Paul Davis walked in, I saw the exact moment recognition hit him. The moment he realized whose celebration he had just walked into. The look on his face said it all. He hadn't seen it coming. But before that night, before the victory, before the chandeliers, before the revenge, there was another story. The one that began 12 years before that moment. Back then I was 31. Living in a modest 1-bedroom apartment in Eastwood. The rent wasn't cheap, but it was manageable. My job as a project manager at a small but promising tech startup paid the bills and gave me hope. We were developing a cybersecurity platform, one we believed could change the industry. We just landed a contract that could have taken us to the next level. I believed we were on the edge of something big. My days started early. Coffee from the corner shop. Train ride downtown. 10, sometimes 12-hour shifts. Not because anyone forced me to, but because I believed every ounce of effort mattered. On Fridays, I'd meet Emma for dinner at this small Italian place she loved. She'd talk about wedding details, table linens, flower arrangements, color palettes, things I didn't fully understand but smiled through anyway. Emma Davis was magnetic. She carried herself with the kind of grace that made rooms go quiet. Always polished, always confident. She was smart, an MBA graduate working in marketing for a luxury brand. Her confidence was what drew me in first. We'd met 5 years earlier at a networking event. She was surrounded by people, laughing about how she didn't understand half the tech jargon being thrown around. I walked up, made a joke about how we probably wouldn't need encryption to talk over dinner. And she laughed, really laughed. From that moment, we were inseparable. But our worlds were different. I grew up with my mom, Ruth, a school librarian who taught me that hard work and honesty were worth more than any check. My dad passed away when I was 15. My brother Mark and I learned early that if something broke, you fixed it yourself. We didn't have much, but what we had was real. Love. Loyalty. The kind of home where laughter filled the gaps left by money. Emma's world was the opposite. She grew up in a mansion. Her father, Paul Davis, ran one of the most successful manufacturing companies in the city. He was the kind of man who believed people fell into 2 categories, useful or forgettable. And from day one, I knew which one he thought I was. Her mother, Laura, was polite, but she treated me like I was temporary, like I'd eventually fade out of Emma's life. Still, Emma told me not to worry. Once they see how happy we are, they'll understand, she'd say. And I believed her. When I proposed, I thought it was proof that love could bridge any gap. I saved for months for that ring. It wasn't extravagant, not like the ones her friends flashed online, but it was elegant, chosen with care. When I got down on one knee in the park where we'd first walked together, she cried. Said yes. The months that followed were a blur. Emma had her wedding binder, swatches, seating charts, mood boards. I handled the band and photographer. My mom was over the moon, telling every coworker her son was marrying the love of his life. Mark kept joking he'd have to learn how to tie a tie, and Maplewood Hall. That was Emma's dream. She showed me photos of the grand staircase, the terrace overlooking the lake, the chandeliers that dripped with crystals. It was more than I could afford, but she assured me her parents would handle the cost. I didn't love the idea. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet. but I let it go. I wanted her to have her perfect day. A week before everything fell apart, we were there for the menu tasting. I remember sunlight spilling across the marble floors, the scent of roasted herbs drifting from the kitchen. My mom sat next to me, smiling like she wanted to memorize every detail. Mark teased me, asking if I'd cry during the vows. And then Emma leaned over, whispered, "In 12 years, we'll be laughing about how stressed we were over table centerpieces." I smiled back and said, "As long as it's with you, I'll laugh about anything." That was the last truly carefree moment I ever had with her, because looking back now, the cracks were already there. I just didn't see them. Not yet. But 12 years later, standing under those same chandeliers in the same hall, facing the people who once told me I wasn't enough, I realized something. Sometimes the best revenge isn't anger, it's success, served cold, under a ceiling of glittering light, right where your story once fell apart. And that night, my story wasn't finished, not even close. Because when Emma's eyes finally met mine across that marble floor, the look she gave me wasn't what I expected. Not regret, not guilt. Something else. Something I couldn't name. Yet. But I knew one thing for certain. The past had just walked back into my life, and this time, I was ready for it. 12 years ago, I stood in my small apartment staring at a wedding suit hanging in my closet, pressed, ready, and waiting for a future that would never come. In just 8 days, I was supposed to walk down the aisle at Maplewood Hall, the most beautiful venue in Dallas. White stone walls, sparkling chandeliers, a terrace that looked out over the lake like something from a dream. It was her dream. Emma Davis, my fiancée, the woman I believed I'd spend the rest of my life with. I didn't come from money, not even close, but I had something I thought mattered more. A good job, a steady paycheck, and the kind of determination that could build anything from nothing. I believed love could handle anything, but love doesn't always survive the storm, because what I didn't know then was that the storm had already started. It began with subtle things, comments from her father, Paul Davis, remarks about how unstable the tech industry was, how a real man should have something solid, something safe. At first, I brushed it off. I thought he was just being protective. I didn't understand yet that for Paul Davis, control wasn't just a habit, it was his nature. And I didn't realize how deeply his daughter lived in his shadow. At the time, I believed the only thing that could hurt us was something we faced together. I had no idea that what would destroy us was something I'd have to face alone. That Wednesday started like any other. I caught the morning train downtown, coffee in hand, the city just waking up around me. I was ready for another long day at the office. We were close to releasing a new product, a major update to our cybersecurity software. The atmosphere was tense but optimistic. I felt like we were building something that could actually make a mark. By mid-morning, I was deep in a meeting when my CEO walked in. His face looked pale. Too pale. "Jack," he said quietly, "can I talk to you outside for a minute?" The hallway felt colder than usual. He couldn't even meet my eyes. "We lost our primary investor overnight," he said. "The deal's dead. We're laying off 1/3 of the company. I'm sorry, but your role's being cut." The words didn't feel real at first. One moment, I had stability, a future, a wedding just 8 days away. The next, everything I'd built my life around was gone. I packed my desk in silence. My coworkers watched with that uneasy sympathy of people who knew. It could have been them. The train ride home felt endless. I sat there staring out the window, my reflection blending into the blur of the city. Numbers ran through my head, savings accounts, bills, honeymoon costs, rent. I told myself I'd fix it. I had skills, experience, a good reputation. I could land another job in weeks. That night, I called Emma. "Something happened today," I said. "The company lost its funding. They had to let me go, but I've already got interviews lined up. This won't last long." There was a pause, longer than it should have been. Then she said softly but firmly, "My dad says this changes everything." The words hit me harder than the layoff. "Emma," I said, forcing a laugh, "it's just a job. We'll get through it together." But she didn't answer, and the silence on the other end told me everything I didn't want to hear. The next day, she asked me to come to her parents' house for dinner. For a moment, I hoped they were going to offer support, maybe a reassuring word, a show of faith. Instead, the moment I stepped into that house, I knew exactly what it was: an ambush. The Davis dining room looked like something out of a magazine. A long mahogany table under a glittering chandelier, silverware lined like soldiers. Paul Davis sat at the head, a glass of whiskey in his hand. His wife, Laura, sat beside him, quiet, graceful, unreadable. Emma sat across from me, her eyes downcast. Paul didn't waste time. "Jack," he began, "I'll speak plainly. You're a sinking ship. My daughter will not marry a man who can't provide the life she deserves." I met his stare. My voice was steady, maybe steadier than I felt. "This isn't about money," I said. "It's about love. We've been planning a future together. That hasn't changed," he smirked, a slow, cutting smirk that said he'd already won. "Love," he said, "is a luxury. Stability is a necessity, and you've just lost it." I turned to Emma. "Tell him this doesn't matter. Tell him we'll figure it out." Her voice came barely above a whisper. "I don't know, Jack. Maybe we should wait until things settle." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I don't even remember leaving. I just remember the cold air on my face and the sound of my own footsteps echoing in the dark. 3 days later, I got my answer, not from Emma, from her mother. She showed up at my apartment, holding the velvet ring box I'd given Emma. "She asked me to return this," Laura said softly. "It's for the best." I stood in the doorway, the box in my palm. It felt heavier than it should have. Colder, too. The wedding was off. Maplewood Hall was canceled. My phone buzzed nonstop with sympathetic texts. Friends who'd heard, co-workers who didn't know what to say. Each message a reminder of how public my humiliation had become. My mother called, her voice trembling. "You come here for dinner tonight," she said. "We'll get through this, Jack." She was angry. I could hear it under the tears. But she was trying to protect me. My younger brother, Mark, showed up at my door that night with a 6-pack of beer. "They're wrong about you," he said. "One day, you're going to show them exactly who they threw away." For the next few weeks, I drifted. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, replaying the last conversation with Emma over and over, trying to pinpoint the exact moment she decided I wasn't worth the risk. Had she ever really believed in us? Or was she just waiting for a reason to walk away? Paul's voice haunted me. "You're a sinking ship." I heard it every time I checked. My bank account, every time I scrolled past a job listing that paid half my old salary. The embarrassment followed me everywhere. Friends tried to set me up with new people. I wasn't ready. I avoided parts of the city where I might see her, or worse, her father. I started taking odd jobs, data entry for a temp agency, IT support, at a community center, website repair for small businesses. Nothing glamorous, nothing permanent, but it kept me alive. My mother worried constantly. "You can't live on scraps forever, Jack," she said over dinner one night. "You're worth more than this." Mark had a different approach. We were in his garage one afternoon while he worked on a beat-up pickup truck. He didn't even look up from the engine when he said, "You want to prove them wrong? Stop living like you already lost. They think you're a sinking ship. Build yourself into a fleet." That line stuck with me. Build yourself into a fleet. It became my mantra. That Monday, I walked into a small computer repair shop near my apartment and asked if they were hiring. The owner, Kyle, needed someone to handle coding projects he couldn't finish himself. The pay was low, but I took it. I treated every project like it was worth 10 times what it paid. At night, I taught myself new programming languages, Python, JavaScript, SQL. I took online cybersecurity courses, read every business book I could find. Slowly, I began freelancing again. reaching out to old contacts, building something small, something mine. 3 years passed before I felt the shift. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was growing, I was choosing my projects, setting my prices, rebuilding my life piece by piece. Then came a turning point, a partnership with a client who ran a logistics company. Together, we developed a custom security platform in his basement. What started as a side project became a company, Miller & Owen Technologies, just 2 of us in the beginning. Then a few contractors, then a real office. We reinvested everything into growth. There were nights I barely slept, days where I survived on coffee and adrenaline, but momentum, real momentum, was building. By the 7th year, we had 16 employees and contracts with several mid-sized corporations. I started getting invited to conferences, not as a guest, but as a speaker. My name meant something. I didn't talk about the past. But in the back of my mind, I kept score. Every contract, every deal, every new milestone. Another point against the Davises. Then, one day, everything came full circle. A major tech firm, Cybercore, approached us with an acquisition offer. They wanted to expand their security division, and they wanted me to lead it. The offer was life-changing. Money I couldn't have imagined 10 years earlier. I took it. 3 years into my new role, Cybercore tasked me with leading another acquisition. A struggling manufacturing company with valuable patents but poor management. When I opened the briefing packet, I froze. The name at the top, Davis Manufacturing, Paul Davis's company. It took me a minute to process it. His company had been swallowed up by a smaller tech firm years ago, a firm now under Cybercore's umbrella, which meant if this deal went through, I would be in control. I didn't rush it. I wanted it done right, months of negotiations, careful steps, strategic patience. When the final papers were signed, it was official. I now owned the company Paul Davis built his empire on. I could have stayed silent. No one needed to know. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. So I rented Maplewood Hall, the same chandeliers, the same terrace, the same staircase that once belonged to a dream that never happened. Only now, it would host something different, a celebration marking the biggest achievement of my life. And on the guest list, in gold-embossed letters, were 3 names: Paul Davis, Laura Davis, Emma Davis. The night of the event was crisp, clear, perfect. Maplewood Hall glowed from the inside out. Music, laughter, the scent of champagne and power in the air. I arrived early. The room looked almost exactly as I remembered. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, the terrace doors open to the autumn air. But this time, I wasn't a guest. I wasn't an outsider. I was the host, and when the Davis family finally walked in, the air shifted. Paul's stride was confident, his expression composed, until he saw me. His eyes widened for just a moment before he caught himself. Laura followed, polite but distant. And then Emma, looking almost the same, but different somehow. Sharper, more guarded. I walked toward them, every step deliberate. Paul, Laura, Emma, I'm glad you could make it. Paul's voice was tight. We were surprised to see your name on the invitation. I thought you might be, I said, smiling. After all, it's not every day a man buys the company that defined another man's career. A flicker crossed his eyes, brief, but real. Business changes hands all the time, he said coolly. True, I replied, but some transactions mean more than others. Laura smiled politely, trying to cut the tension. This is a beautiful event. Thank you, I said. I wanted it to be memorable, especially for certain guests. Emma finally spoke. Her voice was quiet. You've done well for yourself. I met her gaze. I have, and I hope you found what you were looking for. She looked away first. Later that night, I took the microphone. The room fell silent. 12 years ago, I began. I stood in this very hall, believing I was about to start a new chapter in my life. That chapter never began. I was told I was a sinking ship, that I wasn't worth a future worth sharing. Tonight, I'm not here to prove anyone wrong. I'm here to show what's possible when you refuse to let someone else define your worth. The room erupted in applause. I didn't need to say their names. Everyone knew. When the Davis family finally left, Paul stopped before the door. "You've built something impressive," he said. "I built it because I believed in myself," I replied, "even when others didn't." He nodded slowly, the smallest hint of respect in his eyes. Emma lingered behind. "I was wrong," she said softly. "About you. About everything." I looked at her and realized something. The man she left behind all those years ago didn't exist anymore. "We all make choices," I said. "I made mine, too." She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away. When the doors finally closed, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not revenge. Not triumph, freedom. I stepped out onto the terrace. The lake shimmered under the moonlight. The same view I'd once imagined seeing after saying my vows. But this time, there was no heartbreak. No silence. Just the quiet satisfaction of a man who had taken back his story. And the faint, undeniable sense that this story wasn't over yet. There's a moment in every person's life when you realize you've finally stopped fighting ghosts. When you're no longer trying to prove something to the people who doubted you because their voices just don't matter anymore. That moment hit me the night I stood outside Maplewood Hall, the same place where my life had fallen apart over a decade ago. But this time I wasn't a broken man staring at what could have been. I was the one who owned the room inside. The one who had turned every scar, every rejection, every sleepless night into something unshakable. Mark joined me on the terrace, hands in his pockets, his breath visible in the cool October air. He glanced back at the golden light spilling from the ballroom windows and said quietly, "You know, I thought tonight would be about payback, but watching you in there, it didn't feel like that. It felt like you just closed a door, and he was right. For years I thought this night would be the moment I'd finally get even. The moment I'd make them feel what I felt when they called me a sinking ship. But standing there with laughter echoing from the hall and the moon glinting off the lake, I realized it wasn't about them anymore. It never really was. It was about me, about who I'd become, about the man who refused to stay down when the world tried to bury him. My mother stepped out next, her coat wrapped tight around her shoulders. Her face, aged gently by time, still carried that familiar warmth that had seen me through the worst. "Proud of you, son," she said softly. "Not for this," she gestured toward the glowing ballroom, "but for getting back up, when it would have been easier to stay down." Those words hit harder than any applause inside, because she'd been there. She'd seen me when I had nothing, no job, no fiancé, no plan. Just a cracked version of myself trying to pretend I was fine, and through all of it, she never once stopped believing that I'd stand again. The sound of clinking glasses carried faintly from inside, the echo of celebration fading into the night. I looked out over the lake, the reflection of the chandeliers rippling across the surface, and thought about everything that had led me here. Losing my job. That was the first blow. It felt like my entire life had been pulled out from under me. Then losing Emma, that wound went deeper. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was humiliation. Rejection from the one person I thought would always stand beside me. But here's the truth I couldn't see back then. Sometimes life has to break you before it can build you. If I hadn't lost everything, I would never have discovered what I was truly capable of. The following week, the news of the acquisition spread like wildfire through the business world. Every headline had my name. Every article talked about Cybercore's massive expansion and my role at the center of it all. Paul's name, the man who once told me I wasn't good enough for his daughter, barely even appeared. In interviews, I didn't mention the Davises. Not once I talked about resilience, about innovation, about building something that lasts. But deep down, I knew what those reporters didn't, that every line I spoke was built on the ashes of that old pain. Then one afternoon, I got a letter. No return address, just my name, written in a hand I hadn't seen in years. Inside, one short note. "I hope you're happy. I truly mean that." Emma's handwriting. I sat with it for a long time. No anger, no nostalgia, just stillness. I tucked it away in a drawer and never wrote back. Because what could I say? That I had become everything she thought I'd never be? That I had learned to live without needing her approval? The truth was I didn't need her to understand. Some chapters are meant to stay closed. The company grew faster than I ever imagined. New offices, new products, international clients. Each milestone should have felt like a victory, and it did. But not for the reasons people assumed. I didn't measure success by profit margins or industry awards. I measured it by moments of quiet pride, like sitting at my mother's kitchen table on a Sunday evening, laughing over a simple meal. Or dropping by Mark's garage after work, sitting on the hood of an old car while we talked about everything and nothing. Those were the things that kept me grounded. One evening, over dinner, Mark looked at me with that familiar half grin. "So what now, Jack? You've reached the peak. Where do you go from here?" I thought for a moment, the sound of the clock ticking softly in the background. "I keep building," I said. "Not for them. Not for anyone else's approval. Just for me." That answer surprised even me, because years ago, my drive came from wanting to prove people wrong, to show Paul, Emma, everyone who doubted me that I could make it. But somewhere along the way that changed. I stopped chasing validation and started chasing purpose, and that's when real freedom began. Looking back, I realized something strange, that I had been lucky. Lucky to lose Emma, lucky to lose my job, lucky to be underestimated, because every one of those losses had forced me to dig deeper, to rebuild from the ground up. The pain had been my greatest teacher. The humiliation? My fuel. Without it, I'd still be the man trying to fit into someone else's version of success. Years passed, and life moved forward. But one day, on the anniversary of what was supposed to be my wedding, I found myself standing once again at the doors of Maplewood Hall. Not as a groom. Not as a guest of honor. Just as a friend who happened to be attending someone else's wedding. The lobby looked exactly the same. The same marble floors, the same chandeliers glittering overhead, the same faint smell of flowers. But it didn't feel heavy anymore. It didn't sting. The ghosts were gone. For the first time, I saw the place for what it was, just a building. Nothing more. No longer the site of my heartbreak. No longer the symbol of failure. Just another chapter long since closed, and as I stood there waiting for my friend to arrive, I thought about that younger version of myself. The man sitting in his small apartment years ago, his wedding suit still hanging in the closet, his future uncertain. I could still see him, head in his hands, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. If I could speak to him now, I'd tell him this. You're going to survive this. You're going to thrive. The pain you feel right now, it's not the end. It's the beginning. One day, you'll stand in this very place where your world fell apart, and you'll smile because it was the moment everything truly began. When I got home that night, I poured a glass of wine, stepped out onto my balcony, and looked over the city skyline. The light stretched endlessly, thousands of stories unfolding in every window. I felt no anger, no bitterness, just peace. The kind that comes when you finally realize you have nothing left to prove. Because success isn't about revenge. It's not about proving someone wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you can rise, that you can take every insult, every rejection, every failure, and build something beautiful from it. The real victory wasn't in owning Paul's company. It wasn't in that celebration at Maplewood Hall. It was in the quiet mornings when I woke up knowing my life was mine, built not out of spite, but out of purpose. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop explaining yourself. Stop fighting to be understood. Stop trying to make others see your worth. Because once you start living for yourself, truly living, everything else fades into background noise. And that's when the world starts to change. For me, it began with loss, with being called a sinking ship, with watching the woman I loved walk away. But maybe that's what it took to learn how to sail on my own. Maybe that's what it took to realize that you don't need someone to rescue you. You just need to build your own fleet. So if you're listening right now, and you've been told you're not enough, that your dreams are too big, your chances too small, I want you to remember something. You are not the opinions of those who gave up on you. You are the sum of every moment you refused to quit, every late night, every risk, every failure that didn't break you. That's your foundation. That's your proof. And one day, when the people who doubted you see what you've built, you won't need to say a word, because your life will speak louder than any revenge ever could. Some nights, when the world feels quiet, I still look out over that same city, the one that once swallowed me whole and then taught me how to fight back. I think about how far I've come, And sometimes, just for a second, I catch myself wondering what's next, not because I need more, not because I'm chasing another victory, but because there's still something inside me, that same spark that once burned through heartbreak and humiliation, whispering that this
isn't the end, it's just another beginning. And somewhere out there,
another door is waiting to open,